Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning. Hi, I'm Ryan Tofil, and you're listening to episode number 420 of the Corncob Boys. Just kidding, you know it's Unpopular Opinions, and you know that because you got upset as soon as you heard my voice. Guys, before I jump into the episode, I just want to remind you to go to youmeandbtc.com/trade. While you're there, check out today's sponsor, eToro. eToro is an online cryptocurrency trading network where you can explore an ever-expanding variety of cryptocurrencies and buy and sell the underlying asset on eToro's cryptocurrency trading platform. Build your crypto-based portfolio and enjoy benefits not offered by most exchanges, such as near immediate execution of market orders. My personal favorite aspect of eToro is the virtual portfolio where you get 100,000 fake, if you will, dollars, VC. Like you're paying for VC in all these video games for this stuff that doesn't exist in real life. On eToro, you actually get something with that free VC because you get to experiment with trading crypto, see if it's for you, see if you can make a profit with those free $100,000. And after you do that, use real money. You go to the bank, grab $100,000 right quick, put it on the cryptos, do what you did in the virtual portfolio, and then count your cash. It's that simple. Again, that's youmeandbtc.com/trade. Thanks to eToro for sponsoring today's show. And guys, I have something that you're going to be either very, very upset about or very, very pumped about. And that's the fact that this is another solo episode, and therefore, I'm going to be talking about whatever I want, and only what I want. I don't have to put up with Brian. I don't have to put up with Dan. I don't have to put up with any other bozo who's ever been on this podcast with me. Just kidding. Just kidding. I really appreciate anyone who's come on the show with me, and every week I've ever done a duet, I've been the weakest member. For sure. But this week, we are going to be talking about the greatest video games of all time. Now, last time I talked about the greatest sports video games of all time, but this week we're going to be talking about the greatest video games of all time on the Super Nintendo. Now, I left the Super Nintendo part out the first time I said that because to me, the Super Nintendo is the greatest gaming console of all time. I absolutely adore how most of those games looked. I think that 16-bit is the absolute best art style in terms of retro video games. I think that things like the first or I don't know what it would have been at maybe the third generation, the Atari 2600, whatever the Atari 2600 generation was, I think that those were just a little bit too crude to be charming. And we started to get there with the 8-bit NES, but then by the time we moved on to Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, I think that's when gaming graphics were by far the most charming. They had really perfected the way to do pixel art so that each player, each character, each item was really, really easily distinguishable from the other things in your field of view. Things weren't too complicated, but you knew exactly what you were looking at. And I just really, really like the graphics in the 16-bit area. So I'm on sidlexia.com right now, and their tagline is a descent into pop culture madness. Guys, this was one of my favorite websites. I mean, we're talking like 10 years ago. They have since become much, much less active, but it's still worth going on there and checking out a few old articles because, like I said, 10 years ago, I used to love this website, especially when they were good at updating it. So the 100 best Super Nintendo games ever, I haven't decided if I'm going to try to fit this all into one show or it's going to be broken up into two. You'll know by the time you're listening to this because we'll put it in the description, but I don't know right now. I'm in the past, okay? What you're listening to, I've said some time ago. Not as long ago as when these games come out, because 1993 is when the first entry in our list came out, NHL 94. I would have thought that was a little more recent thing where they started dating games a year ahead of when they actually came out. But NHL 94, and I'm assuming its predecessor then, were labeled for the year after they were actually released. It's the third game in EA's series of NHL hockey games, and generally the best looked back upon game in the series. Although they did take out the fighting and they did take out the blood that was in the previous game, this game introduced the one-timer, and that really changed the way you played. Fighting and blood, they were cool, but they didn't really have any effect on gameplay. This game introducing the one-timer completely changed how you would play offense. And honestly, this may only be number 100 on this list, but on the website, they will tell you that they are not too fond of sports games, the gentleman rating this. So they're not going to put sports games as high as maybe they deserve, which is evidenced by NHL 94 being number 100 behind number 99 Stunt Race FX. Now, the way they did this is they had different members of their writing staff each comment on games that they're familiar with. Now, if they hadn't played a certain game, their comments were just left off of that particular game's entry. But my boy Deuce McAllister used to be a running back for the New Orleans Saints. So Deuce McAllister is pretty funny. He says, "Hey, look at that. Number 99 is a game I like better than number 100. With the awesome power of the Super FX chip behind it, I don't know how this game wasn't in the top 98. Bullcrap, I say." I censored that. I don't think we've sworn on this show before, so I might as well, not have to put on the explicit tag once we get onto Spotify. I guess people only think trucks with faces are cool when it's a Disney Pixar production. He's right about that. Cars was much more of a smash hit than Stunt Race FX, which was released in 1994 and had actual 3D graphics, much like Star Fox for the Super Nintendo. It was not the smoothest playing game. It had a frame rate like it was made in a slideshow editor, but it has a lot of charm to it, and that's one of the reasons that it cracks the top 100, settling in nicely, well inside the top 100 at number 99. It was kind of built around like a cheap gimmick, but it was decently fun despite that. The whole game was based around, hey, here is the FX chip being put to use. And what the FX chip did was it was able to render 3D graphics in more than one plane at a time. Which you had multiple planes in the past, but you couldn't interact with them at the same time. Most games that tried to achieve that effect, you would have to be either in the foreground or the background, and you could kind of transition between those two, but you couldn't necessarily interact with the background while you were in the foreground. And everything was kind of on a 2D plane, and you just interact with the plane that you were on at that time. Now, my brother and I, we played this game as a kid, and we booted it up recently because it is on the Nintendo Switch Virtual Console, or the Super Nintendo Virtual Console, whatever you want to play. That app you download on the Switch when you pay your $20 per year that gives you access to these games. It's on there. And we played it, and my brother couldn't believe that this was the same game, that he had been playing. This game actually came out a year before he was born. So he was pretty young when we would have been playing this game together. And he couldn't believe that it was the same game. He's like, there's no way. This game needs to be awesome. It is very, very slow. And if you go back and play Stunt Race FX today, you have to play it with the mindset that is 1994. If you compare it to 2019 games, you're not going to enjoy yourself. If you're like, hey, let's pretend it's 1994 and let's try to see this game for the charm that it has, then you could possibly enjoy it. It's got very, very crude 3D graphics. It's got clumsy controls. But they say that they put it on the list more as like an artifact toward, more of an artifact of the advancement toward actual 3D games. Number 98, The Death and Return of Superman, which was released in 1994, and the developer of this was Blizzard. Now, I personally have never played this game, so I'm going to do this for the games in the future on this list that I haven't played, because as much as I love the Super Nintendo, I don't love all genres equally. I've said to Brian before on this show that JRPGs just do not entice me. Neither does Japanese wrestling, but I like Mexican wrestling. I guess the Japanese and I just don't really get along. That is going to be said out of context like 10 years from now when I'm trying to run for some sort of office. Released in 1994 by Blizzard Entertainment, who, as you may or may not know, you know, they're the dudes behind World of Warcraft. An unstoppable new supervillain, Doomsday, has suddenly risen from center of the earth, and it's up to Superman to try and stop him. When both hero and foe are killed in the struggle, 3 new heroes arise, each claiming to be Superman: the Cyborg, Superboy, and the Eradicator. You will get to play as all 3 of them, as well as Steel, an armored crime fighter who wants to carry on Superman's legacy. But when the Cyborg destroys Coast City and reveals his true intentions, will the new heroes have what it takes to stop him, or will it require the return of the real Superman, based on the popular comics by DC? Doesn't sound too bad. Looks like a 2D beat-em-up or hack and slash. Looks decent. Number 97, Super Adventure Island 2. Released in 1994 by Hudson Soft, who was both developer and publisher. They're not around anymore, unfortunately, but we did get Super Adventure Island 2 out of them. After saving her yet again in the previous Super Adventure Island game, Master Higgins finally decides to marry his girlfriend Tina. Following their union, Master Higgins decides to take her on a cruise for their honeymoon. Unfortunately, the cruise is on a makeshift raft, the kind that clearly wouldn't hold up in a storm. When a storm does hit, the 2 lovebirds are surprised, tragically separated, and Master Higgins blacks out. When the Master awakens, he finds himself on Waku Waku Island, suffering from a bad case of amnesia. The king of Waku Waku Island charges Higgins with a quest: rescue his newly appointed queen, who also happens to be a new arrival to Waku Waku Island, and who also happens to be suffering from amnesia. Convenient, eh? Features RPG elements not found in the previous Adventure Island games, including equipment, a navigable? Yeah, I guess it would be navigable instead of navigatable. Navigable. World map and random battles. Navigable. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not claiming to be Mr. Grammar Man #1. Okay, so don't go telling your friends that I've ever claimed to be Mr. Grammar Man #1 because I've never claimed that. I think I'm okay. I mean, I think I may be like above average, like 60th percentile in my grammar. Super Adventure Island, it appears to be a 2D platformer. I think that I've played the first one, but honestly, I don't know enough about it to even comment on the first one, much less Super Adventure Island 2, which I've never played. Number 96, Wise 3, Wanderer from Wise. Released in 1991 by Tonkin House, and this appears to be an RPG, which is why I've never played it, but it's I don't know. All it's got up there is a screenshot that says, "Please leave me alone." This one doesn't appear to have aged particularly well, just based on looking at the screenshot. But I've never heard of this game before. When Dogi, your friend and traveling companion, hears about strange disturbances in his hometown of Redmont, he rushes there to see what's going on. You accompany him, your Adol Kristen, hero and adventurer. When you arrive in Redmont, you learn that the town is being threatened by evil forces emanating from the nearby Ballastine Castle. Being as you're a hero and all, you take it upon yourself to single-handedly save the town. Game has a cool-looking town. That's what Valdronius is saying in the review section. Number 96, Out of This World, and this appears to be one of those cinematic platformers in the same vein as Prince of Persia, if you've ever played that for Super Nintendo. And I believe that there was an NES port of that as well. I'm not actually sure what would have been like the definitive version. I think probably some PC port was the one that you really had to play if you love Prince of Persia. But Out of This World, the graphic style just looks similar to that. Out of This World is a game that takes place in another world, the outer world. You are Lester Knight Shakin, a brilliant young physicist, but not so brilliant that you don't know better than to mess around with a particle accelerator during a thunderstorm. As a direct result of this tomfoolery, that's, again, I've censored a few things here. Most of the time I try to do it like as I'm reading it, but sometimes I'm not that quick, like I'm just not that smart. I'm in the 60th percentile in terms of grammar, but probably like 4 in terms of IQ. You end up on an alien planet where you're promptly enslaved. With the help of a fellow prisoner, you'll escape, solve some puzzles, almost get killed, and ride a pterodactyl off into the horizon. I've never played this game. I'm not going to tell you I've played this game. I told you before this list started that I haven't played all these. Well, maybe it was like an entry or two in, because I had played the first 2. It wasn't until 98 that I hadn't played one of these games. I don't mean to bore you with these plot synopses, but I just want you to know about them, to know if it sounds interesting to you. Now, I know that the plot isn't going to take you too far in a Super Nintendo game. Gameplay is king. To me, gameplay is king. Okay? Lots of games from this era are not as good looking as games currently. That doesn't mean that they aren't a blast to play. But I just want to read you these short summaries of the game so that you know if maybe it's worth looking into for you. And I'm not saying necessarily you have to go out and buy that cartridge, especially some of these are getting really expensive these days. Number 91 coming up is one of the more expensive games in my personal collection. But we have emulators. Which of course you should never ever use if you haven't paid for the game in one form or another. Emulators are essentially, the way the law works with them is they're a way to back up the content that you've paid for, because these cartridges are probably going to go bad at some point. I'm not saying it's today. I'm not saying it's tomorrow. I'm not saying it's even 10 or 20 years from now. But what I do know is that 100 years from now, there are going to be less first-run copies of Super Nintendo games than there are right now. And emulation is a way to back those up. Now, is the government going to come after you if you've never paid for Out of This World before and you want to give it a try? Probably not. Probably not. Deal with that information what you will. On to number 94, and I know this is a game that Dan Brown seems to enjoy. I don't know if he can hear me out there or not. Tetris Attack. Clear blocks from the screen by lining up matching symbols in this habit-forming Yoshi's Island-themed Tetris variant. Features 5 modes of play: Endless, Time Trial, Stage Clear, Puzzle, and Versus. There were a lot of Tetris variations on the Super Nintendo. Wario's Woods, which was actually the last game released on the NES, also came out for the Super Nintendo. Yoshi's Cookie, Dr. Mario, Kirby Star Stacker, Yoshi. How many Tetris variants does Nintendo need? The difference between this one and a lot of those other ones, I really do like Dr. Mario, but this one's fun. You see what I'm talking about? This is the one where the blocks don't necessarily fall from the ceiling. It's the one where you have to switch blocks around lower in your puzzle to form matches. It's kind of like kind of like a Bejeweled type operation they've got going on there with Tetris Attack. Except there's no DLC, there's no pay to win. Murder Machine says, this game is positively zen-like. It offers some of the best two-player competitive puzzle gaming possible. All you need are pure reaction time skills and twitch reflexes. It's the kind of game you stay up until 4 a.m. playing with a friend, guzzling coffee and laughing like idiots. I've never done that. I think I've played Tetris Attack once. I went through a phase where I was just trying to collect any and all Super Nintendo games, which I've since given up on. But I wouldn't even play some of them, and some of them I would only play one time. And I believe the only time I've ever played this game was Dan Brown of You, Me, and BTC fame. And he really loved it. It wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. And I don't necessarily want to say that I don't like any puzzle games, because I do like some puzzle games. I really like Dr. Mario, and I like some games that aren't necessarily puzzle but have aspects of puzzle in it, like real-time strategy like Halo Wars or Command and Conquer. I actually didn't think Command and Conquer on the N64 was that bad, but Tetris Attack wasn't super my cup of tea. It was definitely a game, though, that I could understand if somebody really liked it. And Dan Brown, he didn't play it for a ton of time, probably less than an hour, but he did tell me that he really liked it, and actually asked to play it again one time, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't really think we ever did. Number 93, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. And if you've never played an RPG before, but you would like to get into them, this is the game to start with. It's a beginner RPG, and there's one other beginner RPG on this list, and based on the amount of time that I've taken to get through the first 7 entries, I don't think I'm going to get to that one today, because that one is much more highly regarded than Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. But the thing about Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is when you look at it for what it is, when you look at it for a game that is meant to introduce people to the RPG genre, instead of another installment in the Final Fantasy series, as far as I know, even though I've never played them, just from what I heard, Final Fantasies can be complicated. They don't necessarily tell you where to go. They don't give you a bunch of super obvious, straightforward strategies. They're time consuming. They can be tedious. They tried to take that out in Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Now, when people first played it, they're like, hey, this isn't really what I was expecting out of a Final Fantasy game. No, it's not, because that's not really what it's supposed to be. It is a beginner RPG, and they just put the Final Fantasy name on there because they knew that would get more people to buy it instead of calling it beginner RPG. Now, is that a little a little underhanded tactic if they didn't really have plans to make this a Final Fantasy game? I mean, it's kind of a Final Fantasy game, but when you're going to deviate from the formula that much, is it fair? I don't know. Some people don't think so. But then there are some people who can appreciate this for what it is. For a game that was not meant to cater to hardcore RPG players, but for one that was meant to introduce people to RPGs. This is like if I'm in the park and I'm shooting the basketball around, I don't want somebody to be heckling me that I'm not LeBron James. I'm not Michael Jordan, and I'm not claiming to be. I'm just there trying to have a good time in a basketball setting. Now, what Final Fantasy did was they did that. They're not trying to be like their predecessors. They're just trying to go and have a good time in an RPG setting. Except they called themselves Final Fantasy. It was made by Square. Square wanted to get more people into its Final Fantasy mainline series. But that's why this doesn't have a number after Final Fantasy. This is a side game. Okay, this is not in the main series of Final Fantasy games. But that would be like me going to the park and calling myself Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird #1, and then expecting people not to judge me versus those guys who as far as I know, I've never played them either in a 1-on-1 or 5v5 setting. I would assume that they would all handle me rather easily when it comes to basketball, which is what the Final Fantasies on this system did. They were better than Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, but it wasn't trying to be better than them. And I don't know how they could have balanced the name recognition with acknowledging that this is not supposed to be in the mainline Final Fantasy series. I guess their way of doing that was giving it a different subtitle, Mystic Quest, instead of another number. Number 92, Secret of the Stars, released in 1995 by developer Tecmo. I like Tecmo sports games a whole bunch. I really, really like Tecmo Super Bowl on both the NES and the Super NES. I think that the sequels on the Super NES were pretty good. Super Tecmo Bowl 2 and 3, and then they were called like Super Bowl Edition and something, yada, yada, yada. I don't remember exactly what they're called. Or just the original Tecmo Bowl on the NES, which comes with some emulators. It comes on the NES Classic, and it comes on the Switch version in the Switch's NES library. Secret of the Stars was released in 1995. The evil wizard Hammond Cruz is raising an army so that he can take over the world. You are Ray, a descendant of the legendary Ankh-Catalan warriors, and only you can defeat them. But first you must seek out fellow descendants of the Ankh-Catalan to join your party and undergo a series of trials to claim your birthright. Only then will you be able to beat Hamnacruz and his fearsome generals. Throughout the game, you also have control of the second party of warriors, the Kustera, which makes for a rather unique, if not sometimes tedious, gameplay experience. We don't want tedious, that's why it's up here at number 92. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking on this. All I need you to know is that Douche McAllister says it's one of the most underrated RPGs for the SNES. So if you like RPGs, then go ahead and play it any way you can. Number 91, Sunset Riders, released in 1993 by Konami. Published by Konami, and let me tell you what, this is one of those games that was great back in the day, but didn't get a whole lot of love. People realized how great it was after it came out, and it was one of those things that was a hidden gem for so long that it's no longer a hidden gem. Chaos reigns supreme in the wild, wild west, and honest homesteaders live in constant fear of lawless criminals. As one of the game's titular characters, the Sunset Riders, it's up to you to save the day. Play as Steve, Billy, Bob, or Cormano and blast the heck out of a variety of baddies, including outlaws, evil ranchers, and a darn dirty engine. Oh man, this article was written 10 years ago. I don't think you can say that anymore. As you head toward a final showdown with the villainous aristocrat, Sir Richard Rose. This is one of those games with like a false ending, and not that like you gotta complete it a certain way to get the best ending, although that is true in this aspect, where if you don't beat it on the most difficult difficulty, it tells you, it says, what are you, yella? Completed, get it the frick off easy difficulty. But Sir Richard Rose goes down, and then he pops up and whips off his bulletproof vest, which I don't really understand why you would do. Like, just because you had a bulletproof vest on and somebody shot you in the chest doesn't mean you have to take off your bulletproof vest so that they can see it. It doesn't make a ton of sense. He was just kind of an arrogant guy, I guess. But this came out on the SNES and the Sega Genesis. This game is really, really getting up there in price on the Super Nintendo. It could be pushing $100, and I'm going to try to multitask here and look up the price of Sunset Riders while I'm talking about it. But this version on the SNES was so much better than the version on the Genesis. It's not even funny. The Genesis only had 2 characters. And on the SNES, you could pick 2 guys that had shotguns. And 2 characters only had revolvers, and they could shoot a little bit faster, but they didn't have a spread. It just went in a straight line, and you had to get a pickup that was a spread. And it looks like the price has actually gone down a little bit for Sunset Riders. It's $55 loose on pricecharting.com is what it's saying. And that's interesting. That I would imagine that is down a bit, because I remember it being higher than this in the past. Yeah, and this is one of those things that January 2016 was about $80, and now you get it for about $55. But, you know, look back, even in 2008, 2010, this game was not over $20. And in fact, you know, you could find it for under 15 in some of those years. Yeah. It looked like it really started to take off in about 2011, which is when most games from this genre really started to go. Because you figure, let's just say a kid who's 8 years old in 1991, when he gets his Super Nintendo, they're going to be around 30. Is that fair? Around 30 in 2010. They're born in the early 80s. And at this point, they're starting to get that disposable income. And that's when the prices from this era of video games really, really started to go up. And Sunset Riders is a perfect example of that. Now, it's not as expensive on the Genesis, but it's also not nearly as good. It is much clunkier. The music is not as good. It's missing some levels. It's not as colorful. It doesn't seem quite as fast. The guns don't sound as good. In fact, Sid Lexia, this website's namesake, in his review of the game says, if this were a Wikipedia article, these are the tags I would put on it. Games that were way better on the SNES than on the Genesis. Games that suffered from retarded Nintendo-related censorship. Yeah, I don't know if you can say retarded now either. This was 10 years ago. Retarded was on its way out 10 years ago, but you probably wouldn't have people boycotting your website. Now people might, for you saying that. Games that had incredibly dull end bosses. I didn't mind Sir Richard Rose. That being said, Konami rarely makes bad games, and Sunset Riders is certainly not one of them. If you're looking for a good run and gun, try Sunset Riders. It's not as orgasmically good as Contra 3, but it's still pretty kick butt. Again, we're trying to avoid the explicit tag on Spotify. Valdronis remembers seeing this game every time I went into the arcade, but every time he went into the arcade, but he never played it, possibly because his parents were smart enough to not give him money for the arcade. It's actually a really fun game with striking similarities to another great Konami game, Turtles in Time, except now in this one you use guns instead of melee weapons. Do yourself a favor, don't pick Steve or Billy though. Bob and Cormano's weapons are infinitely better. And then that's what I was talking about with using the shotgun instead of the revolver. Steve and Billy only had access to a revolver, whereas Bob and Cormano were twerking with a shotgun. You hear? And the shotgun was much better. It didn't fire as fast, but it had that spread. It had that spread, and most enemies besides bosses were one-hit KOs. So you just needed to hit them once, and there weren't that many enemies on screen where you needed to be constantly firing and like constantly mowing down a herd. Excuse me, I'm just getting too passionate. The throat's getting a little tickle in it. Hey, let me grab a little bit of diet ginger ale here. And I'm not telling you what brand it is, but if you want it to be your brand, send her over. Get at me on Twitter at Rytoff. Okay? Slide into the DMs. Okay? Actually, I don't know. Boy, for having worked in social media as long as I have, I'm just on the publisher side of things. Okay, I know how to publish articles. I'm not super good at the one-to-one communication. And because I've used it so much for work, I don't really use Twitter on my own. I think I've tweeted like once in the last 4 years or something. Get a hold of me. Message Dan on Twitter. Tweet at him. Tweet at me. At Rytoff. At YouMeanBTC. If you want me to be drinking your diet ginger ale on the show, just send me a free case. That's all you got to do. That's all I ask. Not even any money. Just send me that ginge, man. Send me the ginge. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Send me the ginge. I want the D ginger ale. Send it to me. I'll slurp it down. And I'll tell the fine people listening whose ginge I'm gulping. Okay, because if I'm going to be drinking D-Ginge, 1, I want it to be for free. 2, you want it to be your ginge, and you want me to be telling people about the D-Ginge. I think we're going to make this a 10-part series. I really do. This is Solo List Assault number 2, subtitle SNES Greatest Games Ever number 1. And we're going to keep it short today. I'm going to keep it short so I can keep pumping these out for you guys, okay? I know. You need more unpopular opinions. You need more Solo List Assault. But I think this is going to be it for me today because there's no way that I'm going to be able to get through another 10 and keep it under an hour. I'm just not going to do it, and I've made the decision lately that I don't want the episodes carrying on too long. I also don't want them being too short, which is once I got to the end of number 91, Sunset Riders, and I saw the list of games coming up, and I realized how long it's going to take me to cover those, I started stalling a bit. I mean, honestly, how many times have I said D-Ginge in the last few minutes? That's some good D-Ginge. Excuse me. I just want to say I hope everything is going well for Dan, because I'm at the Smokey D recording studio today, and I went to go to the restroom in the guest bathroom, and I'm washing my hands after, and I go to dry my hands on a towel, and over the shower is his personalized embroidered towel. So I don't know what he did to get exiled to the guest bathroom, but I hope everything's okay there, because when I'm not using my bathroom in my house, I get a little concerned. Now, maybe it was nothing. Maybe somebody was in the master bathroom. Maybe it was occupied. Maybe the plumbing was broken. I'm just hoping he didn't get exiled there, because that's lonely. Like, getting sent to sleep on the couch is one thing, and it's happened to all of us in a relationship. But being banished from your own bathroom? Maybe he just had to do something so unspeakable in there. He was going to need to take a shower after, and he just couldn't stand to put his darling wife through that. I'm Ryan Tofil. You've been listening to the Corncob Boys, episode number 420. JK! I just got pretty loud there. I got to watch my levels. I was too close to the microphone to be yelling like that, and I'm really sorry. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for yelling like that, and I'm gonna keep my voice lowered from now on. I gotta go. Before I do, I just want to tell you guys a joke. There's this hippie, and he's on a bus, right? And he sees a nun on the bus, and she's a cutie pie, and he's like, excuse me, sweetie. Let me sniff your loins, aka sex. And she's like, the only person I'm in a relationship with is my dear Lord. And the hippie's upset, and as he's getting off the bus driver's like, yo, buddy, I saw what happened back there. Besides you being wildly inappropriate, I think I could help you out. This nun goes and prays at the cemetery every midnight. You just need to go. You need to dress in robes. You need to tell your God, and she'll do the intercourse with you. And so the hippie at midnight, he shows up to the cemetery, and there's the nun praying. And the hippie's dressed up like God, and he explains the situation. And the nun, of course, is like, well, yes, for sure I'll let God deflower me. But it's that time of the month and only anal. So the hippie goes to town. Number 2 style. Frick, dude, did I just avoid all of that swearing in that list and only to ruin it with anal? Is anal like that? It's probably flagged as explicit. So the hippie goes to town. You know, he's really going after the old fart box. And at the end, he's so pumped, you know, he can't believe he's just pulled this off, and he throws off his robe and he goes, surprise, I'm that hippie from the bus. And the nun throws off her outfit and goes, surprise, I'm the bus driver. Guys, this episode today was brought to you by eToro. Go to youmeandbtc.com/trade. Check them out. eToro, digital currency trading platform. I've been Ryan Tofil. This has been Unpopular Opinions, Solo List Assault, episode 2/episode 1 in our sequence on best Super Nintendo games ever. And I just want to say thanks for listening, guys. No matter what you're going through, talk to someone out there. Because people care way more than you think, except for me. I don't care at all. Leave me, I'm just kidding. If I'm the difference between life and death, which at that point you pretty much, you've got bigger problems than just being suicidal. But if it does come to that, and I'm the only person that can save you, reach out. But chances are that's not the case. You know, if you're going through anything mentally, emotionally, there's no longer the stigma around those things. Okay, so just make sure you go and have a conversation with somebody, because as Jules from What Culture says, people care way more than you think, including me. I'm not serious about don't contact me. I do care way more than you think. And now I'm all emotional and crying, and that'll be the way that I need to end it.